Hey everyone, welcome to the Wild Chronicles podcast, where every episode we look at what God's doing locally and globally to find ourselves in greater awe of who He is. And here I am, Zach Roble, and I'm here literally like about 11 seconds after I just ended the last video of the Celebrate Church Tour, where I talked about Gracie Evangelical Lutheran Church, the final Lutheran Church of the Church Tour. And now I'm here to tell you guys about the final church that is actually Waukesha exclusive of the Church Tour. So yeah, this is a little interesting because the last four churches that I have for the next, oh no, actually, you know what, there is still one more Waukesha exclusive one coming up, so that's not entirely true, but for it's almost the last Waukesha exclusive, because again, like I was saying in the last video, some churches that I'm going to in this journey are technically in Pewaukee, Brookfield, Delafield, things like that. They're still in Waukesha County, but not in the proper Waukesha City. So I only have two left for Waukesha City, and this one is one of those last two, and that is Bible Way Baptist Church. Okay, so Bible Way Baptist is a very untraditional church. It's traditional but untraditional at the same time. I'll explain that a little bit more. But Baptist as a denomination is different than other denominations because it's very more open in terms of like who can start a Baptist church. Like, I talked about this in a previous video, but the name Baptist doesn't have a copyright around it like Lutheran does. So like anyone can start a church and call it a Baptist church, versus like a Lutheran church, you have to kind of like go through the higher organizations to call it a Lutheran church and have all these like proper like orders of service and things like that. So Baptist churches can take on so much variety, and they have in this journey of the church tour, right? Like, I've been to tiny Baptist churches with like 6 people. I've been to Baptist churches that have been like more vibrant and more like more people in the room singing like more traditional and contemporary songs. Some are more like traditional hymns, and so like very, very wide spectrum in what you can see at a Baptist church. And this one was on the smaller side, probably one of the smallest churches I've been to in the entire church tour. I believe it was only about 6 people in the room. So I've been to maybe like 3 or 4 churches that fit that category of like very, very small. And part of that might have been because this was a weird Sunday, which I'll explain momentarily as well. But I think one thing I found in these tiny churches is like God is moving in them in the same way that He's moving in like these big places, right? Like, you know, he's definitely active in those small places in a different way, and every church has its own value, right? And so I want to share that. And this one's like very unique because Bible Way Baptist Church is actually not hosted in a traditional church building, but it's hosted in the Waukesha Parks and Rec Center. So it's actually like right next to Frame Park, and in the Parks and Rec Center, like in the same place, like they're playing pickleball in the mornings. Like there's like a pickleball league happening in the gym in the center at the same time when the church is happening in like the room across from the pickleball courts. And so like we had to like close the door so you didn't hear people playing pickleball during church. So that was kind of fun, but like I like that they're placed in such a centralized location. And I asked them about how this church was formed, and they said that it was formed like only like 3 years ago, that they were formed, and they like started hosting these services in this like little Parks and Rec Center in this small room. And it's really beautiful that way that they've been able to do that. And so the church was mostly older people today, but they did tell me that when I went into the room, that they tend to have a little bit of a bigger turnout. And this week was a little smaller because some of the members had kids or grandkids that were in Christmas programs at other churches that Sunday. So they had not attended at Bible Way this week because they were at those other places to go and support their kids or grandkids in these Christmas programs. So that's cool that they have kids and family members that are learning the Christmas story, are learning about Jesus from a young age. Really beautiful to see. But yeah, so I came in, and another thing that was crazy is like, so I found out that they actually, the next 2 weeks, they're not going to be meeting in this building. They're going to be meeting in a different building. So I think it was like God's timing. It's always God's timing when I show up to these churches. Like sometimes it's always like the perfect Sunday or like the perfect Saturday in rare cases. But like, you know, sometimes like I show up on a week where something very big is happening. And like, you've seen this, if you've been watching these videos, like there've been really big things that have been happening in these churches. Like I've been there for pastors' last Sundays. I've been there for like, you know, big ceremonies where people are being like, you know, brought into new positions. I've been there for like times where like the message was exactly what I needed to hear. So very, very timely every time. And this one was very, very timely because like if I had, you know, tried to go to this church in the next 2 weeks, I would have not been able to because I wouldn't know where it is. Because yeah, like the next week they were gonna meet in the Rotary building, which is like across the way, and there would have been no way for me to figure that out. So really, and it's actually funny. There was another day earlier in the church too. I believe it was the week I went to the Genesee Apostolic Tabernacle, where I was actually supposed to go to Bible Way, but I had their service times wrong on my Excel document, and so I ended up going to Genesee that day instead because their service started at 11. So like the Lord like specifically wanted me here on this specific Sunday. So here I was at Bible Way, with a few people in the room. So Bible Way, yeah, like I wrote here, they were 3 years here. I think the first lady I met was named Deb. There was another lady named Barbara. And then the pastor was very young, and you could tell he was like very like both theologically sound, like in that he had like a lot of really good like depth in like the ways that he would speak about Jesus and about the truth. But you could also tell that he had like the Holy Spirit too in the way that he would speak, and I'll move more to that as we go into his sermon, right? Because it was really powerful. But yeah, his name was Pastor Keenan. I wrote he was younger, and he seemed like he had like this really great heart. I took so many notes. Actually, I took like 4 pages of notes just from this one sermon because it was that powerful. So anyways, like Baptist services tend to be less like involved. Like I just filmed the video on the Lutheran Church, Grace Evangelical Lutheran, where they have like all these specific stages where they have communion, they have like, you know, the confession time, they have the creeds, they have the recitations, they have the prayers. Baptist churches, much more simple. So it's just they do the welcome, they sing some songs, they move to an offering. And even here, they didn't even do the offering today because there was only so few people in the room. They were like, today we're not going to do the offering. We're just going to sing another song. And then they did the sermon. And then after the sermon, they actually had a time of Bible study. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to go to that after the service because now I work on Sundays. I switched my work schedule to work on Sundays. So I have to kind of like rush out of the churches I attend on Sundays right now because I have to go straight to work. So I did have to go straight to work right after the service, but they do have a Bible study after the service at 10:30. So the service is at 9:30, Bible study at 10:30. But the service itself, yeah, they sang these songs, stand up for Jesus. It was like, stand up for Jesus, la, 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 la. And then they sing a song called Guide Me, O Thou Great Jehovah. And what I liked is, again, like this was a really cool church. I talked about this a little bit in the last video of like the Grace Evangelical Lutheran Church, how after some of the readings, the pastor would like, or before some of the readings, he would explain what the reading was about. And like what happened here actually at the Bible Way Baptist Church was very similar, where like, right after we sang the song, like, Guide Me, O Thou Great Jehovah, like the pastor was like, do you guys know what this song is about? And like a lot of the older congregation members were like, oh, I don't really know. Like he was like, what Bible story is this based off of? And like a lot of them were like, oh, I don't know. And he was like, you know, I'm just quizzing you guys because like, you know, sometimes we sing these words from these old hymns and we don't actually know what they mean. And like, it's important to know what they mean, to know where the context is in the story. And so this song, Guide Me, O Thou Great Jehovah, was actually written about like the Israelites wandering the wilderness. And, you know, it has lines in the song about like the pillar of fire and the cloud by day and the fire by night. And a lot of those imagery from the time when the Israelites were wandering in the desert and they needed God's guidance to guide them through the desert, right? And metaphorically speaking, a lot of the time we can have situations where we are looking to God for guidance as well. So that was really cool that they like that he like took time to emphasize where that story came from and like, you know, the historical significance of everything. So then they moved to the next song called Higher Ground, and that was a really powerful song as well. And so then after that song, they moved to the song Rock of Ages. So they sang 4 different songs, and then they moved to the sermon, where the sermon was based most specifically on Philippians 3:12-14, where it talks about, you know, where Paul's talking about basically like forgetting what lies behind and pressing forward to what lies ahead. And so he has this big emphasis on that, which is beautiful. So the pastor, though, he kind of like was speaking about how a lot of the time, like people, you know, that verse, it talks about like striving forward to what lies ahead. And it can be a thing where a lot of Christians get caught in the trap of legalism, right? Where legalism is this idea of like doing all these things for God. And we cannot like let we cannot let trying to do all these things for God be what we place our identity in. Like he was saying, like we have to first of all take hold of Christ's hold on us. Like that our salvation is not by anything we do, but it's only by Christ's hold on us that we are doing it. And that we are having hope. So that's like a beautiful thing. And then the second thing he said is like we have to stop treating spiritual disciplines like payments, but instead like training. And I think I've kind of empathized with this in seasons of my life where like I'm doing all these things for God. I feel like I have to do all these things for God. Like they feel like I almost like owe God this stuff because of like what he did for me. I like owe him my life. I owe him doing this stuff. But like when we have that attitude about it, like, you know, it kind of like sucks the joy out of it and it sucks the relationship out of it because it's like, oh, we're just doing this out of obligation. But when we see like the spiritual disciplines instead like training, like it's making us stronger. It's like helping us to grow into who God's made us to be. Like that attitude and that heart posture shift is huge. So he also shared in his sermon about Philippians 1:6, where it says, he who began a good work in you will carry it to completion. Like really trusting God to be the one to perfect us. Because like when you start to trust like your Bible reading or trust like you're serving in ministry or trust like following and doing good works as being what makes you a good Christian or like gives you hope in life, like those things are not good and they like kind of derail you a little bit, right? And he also shared from 1 John 3, we will see him rightly in the end, which is significant. And then he also was sharing a story about how like a lot of the time there will be like he was using the metaphor of somebody who's a lifeguard trying to save somebody who's drowning. And like if they're trying to save someone who's drowning, like sometimes lifeguards have to knock the person that's drowning unconscious because like the person who's drowning is panicking, and sometimes they'll try to drag the person down with them who's trying to save them. So sometimes they have to be knocked unconscious to actually be saved. And he was using that as a metaphor to say like sometimes Jesus like kind of has to knock us unconscious because like, you know, Jesus is trying to save us, but we don't really know how to like get through that, or we don't really know how to how to be saved like passively, right? Because that's really what it is. Like Jesus saves us not because we're like reaching out or like we're trying to like desperately cling to him, but it's because he clings to us. Like he grabs us, he leeches onto us, and it's not us like doing all this work to get to him. It's like him reaching out and grabbing our hand, right? And so a lot of the time, like when we're like doing all this stuff to try and reach for Jesus, try and like grab Jesus, it's actually not letting us be saved, because like all he wants to do is just grab onto us, like instead of like us having to put in all this work to get to him. And I think that's like really cool. He emphasized that it is not about us doing all this work to grab onto Jesus and like flailing around like, Jesus, I need you. It's like, just like, let him take you in his peace and in his grasp. And you don't have to strive and do all this crazy stuff. But like, again, that verse does talk about like, it does talk about the value of like striving, like, you know, we're pressing on to what lies ahead. So there is a pressing on that we do, but it's not like a legalistic pressing on. It's not like we're doing it out of a place of like proving ourselves, but it's out of a place of like already being rescued by Jesus, like now wanting to know him more. So another thing that he said in his sermon is he said like in those verses it talks about Paul saying he's not already attained it. Even though he's an apostle, he still had room to grow. And so like we have to be humble like about our progress and our growth, but also be humble about our failures and our defeat, right? Because you can define yourself by either one. And he was really emphasizing the two buzzwords which have really been big in my life of pride and shame, right? These are like these two opposite ends of identity, kind of like distortion, I would say. The enemy can either distort your identity by like giving you this pride where you're like so focused on your progress and your growth that like you define yourself by like, look at me, how much progress I made, how much growth I made, and you get so proud of yourself you forget actually that progress is only possible because of God. Or you get so shameful and you look at your failures and your defeat and you look how far I've fallen, like I have no hope, I'm useless, I'm trash, and like you define yourself that way. And so you can get into both of those like big pit holes of like being too full of yourself or too down on yourself. And I wrote here, like, don't focus on our achievements or lack thereof, but on his finished work and his ongoing work. Like, we have to focus on God's work and what he's already done and what he's still doing, instead of like, you know, our mistakes. And so like that verse also talks about forgetting the past and pressing on to what lies ahead. And so it's like an encouragement to us to like, to forget like our past and to press on to the future with him. And so I think that's really cool. And again, like there's a lot of times in the Bible where he talks about remembering too. Like there's an importance to remembering God and what he's done and his character and his like breakthroughs in our lives. But when it comes to forgetting, like we have to forget the things that are about us and like really like focus on him. So it's big. Like I wrote here, his light is bigger than our darkness. Like when we feel like in those places of shame, like we're not good enough and our failures are what define us, we have to remember his light is bigger. Then he also, the pastor Keenan, he asked this really good question where he said, if all public recognition was removed, would you still pursue Christ? And that one really hit me deep, because like one thing I've really been struggling with recently is feeling like I don't have a voice. Like I've been feeling a lot like nobody really cares what I have to say. Like pretty much nobody watches these videos. Like if you are, you're the one rare person watching them. But for the most part, I feel like nobody really ever sees what I'm doing for God or recognizes any of it. And, you know, there's times where I'm like, you know, God, like I want people to see me. I want people to see what I'm doing for him. And there are times where I considered like leaving. But like, you know, the question, if all public recognition was removed, would you still pursue Christ? I guess my answer is yes, because I'm still doing it. I'm still making this video in my car right now, even though like 3 people will ever watch it. And I still went to all 60 churches this year, like out of, well, I haven't gotten all 60 yet, but I'll be at all 60 within the next 2 weeks. And like, I still do WOW every day, where I pray and worship or worship on the street every day. And sometimes it's not super extravagant. Sometimes I just drive by for like 3 seconds and say a little quick prayer for a house. But you know, like I'm still doing these little things to serve God, to stay rooted in God. And there's other ways where I'm not being faithful at all, where like I'm idolizing other things and I'm putting other things before him and my heart isn't all there with Jesus. But there are ways where I'm still I'm still serving God even when I'm not being recognized for it or given credit. But I wrote in my notes, I'm pursuing you now, God, without public recognition, but I do long for more recognition. It's hard to be and to feel unseen. And so that's been what I've been wrestling with a lot recently, is just like this feeling of being unseen. And like, even though I'm doing all this stuff for God and I want people to see it, like I want to have peace, like even if they don't see it. And so I thought that was cool that he just emphasized that question and like had me ask that and wrestle with that in my spirit of like, God, even if nobody ever sees me, will I still keep this up? Will I still continue to follow him? And right now I am, but like there are days where I think like, you know, if I keep doing all this stuff and it never gains traction, if people never notice like the stuff I'm doing for God, like maybe I'll just stop it all. Maybe I'll just decide he's not worth it and do something that will gain people's approval. Cause like, that's what the world tries to convince us into. It tries to convince us that, you know, like pursuing the Lord and doing the things he's called us to isn't really worth it. And instead we should just do things that, you know, are going to gain more buzz or gain more favor from people's opinions. So it's a real wrestle that happens in me. But anyways, so he gave some more good lines. He said, you don't win by looking back. He was talking about like winning the race, because that's like another thing that's kind of emphasized in that chapter is like when people are running a race, you don't win by looking back. You have to look forward instead. He said like a lot of people, they're looking for status, for comfort, or for men's applause, which is not what we need to be looking for. We need to just be looking for Jesus. He was also talking about Galatians, the book of Galatians, because it talks a lot about the law, and it talks a lot about how like, you know, you're foolish if you have the spirit to perfect yourself in the flesh. Like, you know, like we have the Spirit of God now, so we don't have to like perfect ourselves by the law, but the Holy Spirit perfects us by transforming us instead of us doing it in our own strength. He said like you can add extra burdens to yourself, but they can replace Christ and actually lead you backwards and not forwards. So like you can put all these spiritual disciplines on yourself where you think you're like making progress and you're growing, but it's actually like stunting your growth and it's actually like killing you. And I am like even like wrestling with that myself, because like this year I've been feeling all this burden on myself to like do all these bigger things, like wake up in the morning to spend time with God has been like a big one, where it's like, I think that would be good in principle, but like then I like wonder, like, is that actually going to grow me, or is that just going to like make me more irritable and annoyed, like trying to do all these more legalistic things for him? Like he said, they can feel like growth or self-improvement, but they're not always. And past achievements and past failures have to be left behind. Pride and shame create a self-dependence for us. And then I wrote in my notes here about 2 movies that like have really impacted me. And I posted about this on my Instagram like a week ago. But like there's been 2 movies in my life that really fit those themes. Like one is The Greatest Showman, which I watched in 2017, and like that really fit the season of life I was in 2018, because in The Greatest Showman, the main character, he like ends up becoming so big and like getting all this influence where he gets prideful, and then he has to get humbled for the fact that he became so prideful, so that movie like hit me in my time of pride in my life. And then like recently this year, there was this movie called K-pop Demon Hunters, and that movie is all about shame and the main character battling with this shame and feeling like she's got to hide herself and she can't be her true self. And she has to like kind of figure everything out on her own because she can't share who she really is with the world. And that's also kind of something I struggle with as well, especially in this season, is like feeling like nobody else understands me, and so I have to figure out things on my own. Nobody understands my calling doesn't fit with what other people are doing, so I have to do it by myself. And so like I relate very much to the themes of pride and shame, and so it was really cool that I was here on this very specific Sunday. Again, it's always God's timing, to remind me like not to put my worth in my pride or in my shame, but in Jesus. So yeah, like again, more notes here. It says like, don't get your confidence from your performance or disciplines. You'll disappoint yourself and things will come crashing down. Yeah, just have a single-minded commitment to Jesus, not to your tasks. Undivided loyalty and pursuit. Push forward. He was also saying like a lot of people like deconstruct their faith, which has been interesting because like there are some people I see online who are doing this like deconstruction of faith thing. And he was saying like a lot of people do that because like they put their hope in their spiritual disciplines instead of actually in Jesus. And so like they're trying to like, deconstruct their faith, which a lot of them just leave the faith because like, they started to see Jesus only through the lens of like all this stuff that they felt like they were supposed to do because of churches. And yeah, it's like, you got to put that commitment in Jesus, not in your tasks, and don't get confidence from your performance or your disciplines. So yeah, like kind of one of the last statements it said was like, the prize is knowing Christ now more and more so that one day we can know him fully. And that's really what it comes down to, is like every day, like the prize like we get to have is like every day we get to know Jesus more and more. So one day we can know him fully, and like really just like really wanting to know God, to know him. And like actually just yesterday I was at Alpha, another group I go to on Tuesday nights, and they had like this panel called the Stump the Chump panel, where like 4 of the bigger leaders in the church, or 5 of them, were up there, and one of them had given this statement about how like, like with God, you have to, like in times when it's harder to follow him, like you have to see him, you have to ask yourself the question about like, or like you kind of have to change your perspective to see God as beautiful and not just as useful. Because a lot of people, they like only follow God because he's useful. He blesses them. He does things that benefit them. But when you see God as beautiful and not just as useful, like that makes you want to know him more. Like you want to know his beauty. You want to know his character. You want to know who he actually is, instead of just like what he can be to benefit you. And so that kind of like felt like it connected there because of that thing where it really just emphasized like the desire to know him more, being such a big thing. Like that is our prize, is to know God more because of his beauty. It's not because he does stuff for us, but it's because of his character. He's beautiful. He's amazing, and he's worth getting to know and give our all for. So that was the sermon. And then after that, they kind of had a transition time. Also, I should mention for the music, they didn't have any instruments. It was mostly either a cappella, or they had a speaker where they would like play like instrumental music in the back on the speaker. So again, like in smaller churches where they don't really have the resources to have a live worship team or instruments, that's what they do. And again, like this is a community center. Like this is literally at the rec center, like in a small room in the rec center with like little folding chairs. Like there's no pews, there's no stained glass windows, there's no cross in the front of the room. or there might have been a cross. I don't remember. There might have been like a little one. I think they had a podium. I don't know if there was like a stand-up cross. I don't remember. But again, it was not something extravagant aesthetically, but it doesn't have to be, because God can like speak through anything. And this young pastor, again, like I really think he had like so much wisdom, like to know all this stuff about pride and shame and disciplines, and even like speaking on stuff like deconstruction, and like how a lot of people are leaving the faith because they like tried to be legalistic, and then like they realized that they would never be good enough in their own works, so they just think, oh, this isn't working. But the point was never to do it in our works. It was always to do it in Jesus. And the disciplines aren't to give us our worth or our value, but instead they're to train us so that we can become more who God's made us to be. So really good stuff. So anyways, yeah, they said next few weeks they're going to be in the Rotary building, and then they're going to have an outreach service on January 18th, which they invited me to, and I'd love to go, but again, like I work on Sundays now, so I probably can't stay super long, which is a bummer. I'm really trying to figure out my life right now, like, because my doctor told me to quit my job, and I feel like I should quit my job, but I don't have another job to get right now. So I'm just very lost in terms of like work and schedule and finances and yada, yada, yada. And I still have to like figure out my hospital bill. I'm about to go to the library and fill out some paperwork to try and get that reduced. So there's like a lot of chaos going on in my life right now. But the beauty of God is that like even when things around us are chaotic, he's still faithful. So that's beautiful. But anyways, yeah, they had the Bible study. I had to leave, so I didn't get to see it. But that was Bible Way Baptist. Very small church, only like 6 or 7 people in the room. And they probably have more on a normal Sunday where their kids aren't all in Christmas programs. So maybe it's more like 20 people or something. Again, still very small, but again, like it's grassroots, and like, things do start small, but the Lord can multiply and do a lot, and he can make big things out of small ones. So it's really beautiful, guys. Love to see it. Wow, this sun is really bright. Hopefully you guys could kind of see me during that whole time. I'm just realizing now that angle was really bad, but anyways, I mean, you can hear me, like it's a podcast, so video, audio, whatever. The reason I did do video for these episodes, because I don't do video on our other podcast with my friend Dan, is because I wanted to make things more personal. I feel like sometimes when you're just hearing a voice, it's not as personal as when you can see somebody's face and like, they're a real human. So here I am, a real human in my car in the Target parking lot filming my second church tour video of the day. But that being said, that is 56 church down, 4 to go, and only 2 Sundays, a Saturday and a Christmas service will be what get me to that final number of 60 churches in a year, plus 2 bonus ones. Of course, we went to the one in Illinois and the one in Japan. So 62 churches. It's been an amazing ride, guys. And it's not over yet. We still got these final ones to knock out. So can't wait to do it in the coming weeks ahead. So until then, thank you all for tuning in. Only 4 churches left, right? I don't know if I said 6 or 4, but yeah, there's only 4 left. Only 4 left. Final 4, baby. Yeah, it's a Methodist church, a Baptist church, my friend Connor's church, which I think is non-denom, but I couldn't tell you 100% on that. And then another non-denom. So yeah, really good finale we got coming here. It's going to be fun. But until then, thank you all for tuning in. And until next time, stay in awe and wonder. Bye.